Storytelling. It was 7:15 a.m. when I opened my front door and saw a sight that honestly felt like something out of a bad reality show. There stood Karen Whitmore, our HOA president, in full battle mode. She had two board members flanking her like bodyguards, a locksmith carrying a nervous look into toolkit, and a manila folder thick enough to double as a doorstop. And of course, Karen herself was dressed in her signature burgundy power suit, the one she always saved for what she proudly called enforcement days. Her smile could have frozen water in July. "We need to conduct the property transfer inspection," she announced, tapping her manicured nails against a clipboard for emphasis. I blinked at her, still clutching my coffee mug and my work clothes. My brain was not prepared for this level of insanity before 8 a.m. Property transfer inspection? Karen, what are you talking about? She gave me that condescending head tilt, the one she usually reserved for lecturing neighbors about trash can placement. 7 years is the maximum construction period allowed under our new retroactive building ordinance. Your house now falls under Community Asset Protocol. I nearly choked on my coffee. Karen, I built this house with my own hands. Every board, every nail, every tile. This is my property. She smiled wider, like a teacher explaining math to a slow student. Actually, according to Amendment 17B of our updated covenant, any property under extended construction becomes subject to HOA acquisition rights. We voted on it last month at the emergency meeting. Yeah, the emergency meeting she had scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when everyone was at work. 3 people showed up. All 3 happened to be her best friends from the Wednesday Wine Club. Democracy in action, folks. Let me rewind for a second because you need the full picture to understand just how absurd this moment was. My name is Marcus Chin. I'm a structural engineer for a major construction firm downtown. 7 years ago, I bought a quiet plot of land in Pinewood Estates, about 30 minutes outside the city. The lot had been sitting empty forever, and I had this dream: build my own house, slowly with my own 2 hands. No loans, no mortgage chains, just paying cash as I went, doing the work on weekends and evenings. After spending all week designing skyscrapers and office parts for clients, this was my therapy, my sanctuary. Back then, Pinewood Estates had a president named Bob. Bob was a retired accountant, reasonable, friendly, and about as threatening as a golden retriever. He used to wander over while I worked, bring me lemonade on hot days, and say things like, "Take your time, Marcus, a custom home's worth doing right." He understood the process, he understood me. And then came Karen. She took over about 18 months ago after Bob moved to Florida. Karen was a former retail manager who had been downsized and decided the HOA would be her new empire. Her campaign promise? Increase property values through strict enforcement and creative interpretation of the rules. Creative was putting it mildly. She treated the bylaws like sacred scripture, and she was the only high priestess qualified to interpret them. At first, it was small things. She started measuring grass height with an actual ruler. She timed how long people left their trash bins on the curb. She handed out violation slips like they were Halloween candy. But the real trouble started when I finally finished construction and moved in full-time. That's when the pink notices began. And yes, they were literally pink because Karen believed neon paper made them more noticeable. The first one said, "Mailbox 3 inches too tall, $50 fine." The next, "Driveway has unapproved shine level, $50 fine." Then, "House numbers use a serif font when sans serif is clearly specified, $50 fine." I started keeping them in a folder I titled Karen's Greatest Hits. By month 2, I had 37 violations. I'd paid nearly $2,000 just to keep the peace. And she wasn't done. I caught her photographing my windows at 6 a.m. She measured the angle of my porch light with a protractor. She pulled out a color wheel to argue that my front door was one shade too cheerful. Then she started whispering to neighbors that I was running an illegal construction business out of my home. Because, heaven forbid, I owned tools and sometimes worked on my deck. She filed complaints with the city, wasting inspectors' time and mine. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day she showed up with a locksmith, declaring she was taking my house. I stared at her. I need to see this so-called amendment. Karen pulled out her manila folder with a flourish like she was unveiling a magic trick. Right here, Amendment 17B, passed by a unanimous vote of all attending members. She jabbed her finger at the highlighted text. Any property under construction for more than 5 years shall be deemed abandoned and subject to HOA recovery for community benefit. I almost laughed. Karen, I've been living here the entire time. You can't retroactively apply rules.
That's not how laws work. She waved a dismissive hand. The HOA board has determined that living in an incomplete structure does not constitute occupancy, and retroactive application is perfectly legal under Section 9 of our Emergency Powers Clause. Yeah, she really said that. So I did what any sane person would do. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Karen, are you seriously trying to steal my house right now? She bristled. It is not theft. It is a legal transfer of improperly managed assets. The community has suffered from your prolonged construction project. We are protecting property values. And what exactly does the HOA plan to do with my house after this transfer? Her eyes lit up. She had clearly rehearsed this. We will convert it into a community center. The main floor for HOA meetings, the basement for seasonal decoration storage, and the upper floor as office space for board members. So basically, you want my house for your personal clubhouse? I asked, still recording. It is for the benefit of all residents, she insisted, though her voice wavered. Then she slipped. We have already applied for several grants identifying this property as a future community resource center. The paperwork has been filed with the state. That was her fatal mistake. I smiled, though inside I was seething. Well, I guess I'd better call my lawyer. That afternoon, I met with David Kim, a property law attorney. When I explained the situation, he laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. Then he got serious. Marcus, this is insane. None of this is legal. She can't just take your house. We pulled up the real bylaws filed with the county. No amendment, 17B. The last official amendment was 2 years ago, about pool fence heights. David dug deeper and found something worse. Karen really had filed grant applications with the state, claiming my property as a community center already in operation. This is fraud, David said flatly. Federal fraud, if any of those funds were approved. Sure enough, Karen had preliminary approval for $40,000. The money hadn't been released yet, but the application was full of lies. She even submitted photos of my home claiming it was a literacy center and senior activity hub. 3 days later, Detective Patricia Morris knocked on my door. She was investigating fraud tied to the grant applications. I showed her everything, including my video. The investigation unraveled Karen's empire fast. The locksmith admitted Karen told him she was the legal owner conducting an eviction. The 2 board members confessed they'd never seen Amendment 17B until that morning, when she shoved it at them in the car. Turns out, this wasn't her first stunt. She'd once tried to seize an elderly neighbor's shed, calling it an eyesore that should be replaced with an HOA storage unit. That got shut down when the neighbor's son, a cop, intervened. This time, Karen's schemes had gone too far. State investigators found she'd applied for multiple grants, all claiming my property as community-owned. She even drafted renovation plans. The next HOA meeting was legendary. Residents packed the rec center. Karen tried to maintain her usual poise, but she was pale, shuffling papers and checking her phone like her lawyer might text her a miracle. The board called for an emergency election. Karen objected, citing some made-up rule about notice periods, but residents weren't having it. One by one, residents stood and shared their stories. Her fines, her harassment, her ridiculous rules. The vote? 112-3. And those 3 were her Mind Club friends who looked like they regretted it instantly. But the real hammer fell in court 2 weeks later. Karen stood before Judge Patterson, facing charges of attempted fraud, filing false documents, and conspiracy to commit theft. Her lawyer tried to argue she had misunderstood HOA regulations. The judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was damning. The fake amendment she created on her computer, forged meeting minutes, the grant applications with my fake signature, and emails where she plotted to evict me so the HOA could use my workshop. She tried to speak for herself, claiming she just wanted to improve the neighborhood and that I was the troublemaker. The judge cut her off. Attempting to steal someone's house is not a neighborhood improvement project, Miss Whitmore. The sentence came down. 3 years probation, $50,000 in fines, 300 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Plus, she had to pay my $23,000 in legal fees. Her face went gray. "But that's more than my annual salary. I'll lose my house." The judge didn't flinch. "Perhaps you should have considered that before attempting to take someone else's." And just like that, the woman who tried to steal my home lost her empire, her reputation, and her own house. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock. It shows up in a burgundy suit, holding a fake amendment, and gets escorted out in handcuffs.